It's something I haven't talked about a lot on the channel. I mean, I've done religion to death, I've done some on politics, but never, at least not that I can recall, have I ever really talked about my own personal philosophical positions. So I came across a way that might help us explore it. So let's do that. It's been quite a long time since I did one of these, but given some of what I've been talking about recently, and especially what I've been doing over on my blog, I figured why the heck not? So today, we're going to go through a quiz meant to identify some of my various philosophical positions, and we'll talk about some of the things that I accept and why I accept them. We'll also see why some of these things just aren't very useful, at least in my opinion. Now, this is likely to be pretty long, especially if you watch all these videos in a row, which I don't really recommend. So get comfortable and let's get going. So first, we get an overview, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time reading through it because it just doesn't matter. It does say that we'll learn 3 things at the bottom. We can learn what philosophical views I have, which may or may not be interesting. We can see if my answers compare to philosophy professors and other users, which most of the time I don't really care about, but that could be interesting to see too. Ultimately, it's just an appeal to authority and popularity, and yeah, big deal. I only care about how people justify their beliefs and not what beliefs they actually have. But whatever, we'll see that when it comes. And third, we can see what psychological traits say about my philosophical positions. And I don't know if that's going to be all that useful either, but I guess we'll take a look at it when we get there. Anyway, let's get started because there's a whole lot of questions to get through. Now, fair warning, I did skip over another page of explanation. You can certainly go back and read it if you want. As always, the link is in the description if you want to go take this for yourself. But there's going to be more than enough of me reading at you already, so let's not make it obnoxious, shall we? So let's get going. Question number 1. Abstract objects. Philosophers debate whether abstract objects exist, things like numbers. They are not physical objects, but some argue that there is also more than just a thought or idea in people's minds. They are supposed to be a third kind of thing that is neither physical nor mental. Now here's where I'm going to start off disagreeing, and you know me, I do this a lot, because the question as a whole isn't well defined. Abstract objects are real in the sense that they are electrochemical reactions that take place within the physical human brain. A number isn't something that you can hold, but it definitely is a brain state. Without the brain, the number simply doesn't exist. This is a question that actually doesn't have a valid answer for me to choose from. I can say that they exist because as a brain state, they are demonstrable, they are something that takes place within objective reality, but that actually doesn't have something that I can pick from. I can also say they don't exist because they're just a mental concept. But mental concepts are by definition brain states, and those exist, so you can see the problem. Anyway, I'm going to go with the second, even though, if I have to be honest about it, neither of them really work for me. So there's a second page for all of these, so you'll know what's coming up going down the line, where it explains the answer, etc., etc. So it says that I'm a nominalist, which I don't think is actually accurate per se, based on what I said before. See, on the graph, there's Platonist, nominalist, and other. Well, how do you get an other result with only 2 options? This is kind of the problem that I have with a lot of these quizzes, and I know that's not something you can really get beyond in this format, but my answer isn't really covered by the options provided. Anyway, at the bottom, it has an explanation, so let's go down and read it. Explanation of this view. You think that only particular objects exist. Generalizations and abstractions are human inventions. Insofar as there are categories, you would say they are creations of mind or language. Abstract things are not distinct parts of reality. Instead, they are just our way of organizing around particular things. You think numbers are invented, not discovered. Now, I do agree with that, more or less. We made up numbers and language and a lot of other things because it was useful to us. If humans had never evolved, if the human concept of numbers had never existed, then none of this stuff would be there. There might be other concepts of numbers out there somewhere in the cosmos we just don't know, but those likewise only exist within the minds of the beings that made them up. So, I don't know what to make of that one, really. You let me know in the comments what you think. Anyway, that's one down. Let's keep going. On to number 2. Philosophy has much to say about what determines the nature of beauty. Some philosophers believe that all opinions on beauty and artistic value are equally correct, whereas other philosophers believe that there are objective truths about which things are beautiful or artistically valuable and which things are not. For those who believe in objective truths about beauty, there is much debate about who or what determines these truths. Well, this one is easy. Beauty is completely subjective. You only have to look at the various standards of beauty among various groups of humans around the world, both across the planet and throughout time. Like concepts, it's just something we made up. Of course, that makes me an aesthetic subjectivist. Duh! This is where I'd really love to know the justification for the objectivists, because I can see absolutely no rational reason to hold that view. And this really comes off as another instance of fee-fees over facts. Therefore, let's just skip to the bottom where it explains, you believe that beauty and ugliness are subjective qualities. Whether something is beautiful depends on how it strikes you, but objective reality does not include any facts about beauty. By the same token, there is no way to tell who is right and who is wrong in a debate over artistic merit. But it's not just that we can never know for sure what is truly beautiful. Rather, the subjectivist thinks our aesthetic preferences have nothing to do with shared objective reality at all. There are no objective truths about aesthetic values like beauty. And I think that's a bit overstated, but kind of, maybe, sort of okay. Because there are a lot of reasons that humans find things beautiful, things that are programmed into us by evolution to benefit the continuation of the species. And that's why we tend to value symmetry and body types that appear healthy, because reproduction benefits from such things. Yet there are still cultures out there that see being grossly overweight as beautiful for completely different reasons, such as the knowledge that they have enough to eat and they therefore might produce decent offspring. Truth be told, this is another case where I'd probably be in the other part to some degree, because it's starting to look like most of these questions are trying to shoehorn you into one or two options when there are a whole lot more out there. But anyway, let's keep moving on. Question 3. The external world. Philosophers debate whether the world is all in the mind, our collective minds, or perhaps in God's mind, or if it is a physical reality that we know about through science and observation. Some philosophers maintain it is impossible to know anything about reality since we can never experience reality directly. All we have are our own sense experiences. Now this one, again, is pretty simple. From every shred of evidence that we have at hand, and keep in mind, we can only go with the evidence that we actually have, not the evidence that we wish we had, not the evidence that would be really handy to have. We can only go with what we've got. But based on that evidence, the universe exists beyond our minds. Now, there's no way to beat the question of hard solipsism, but I've never seen anyone make a convincing case that it is anything more than it actually seems to be. So I'm going with the first one. And that makes me an external world realist. Most people agree with me. The ones who don't, and I've had my fair share of discussions with that kind of person, I really don't think they make any sense at all. They've spent way too much time watching movies. And this is kind of where I have a lot of problems with a lot of philosophy geeks. Because there are a lot of people who don't know how to get out of their own heads and live in the real world. They seem to think that if they can conceive an idea, it might be true. And that's stupid. It really, really is. These people have absolutely no interest in external verification for any of the crap that they come up with. And that's a problem. It really is. And I have yet to have any of them explain how that makes any sense whatsoever. But anyway, on to the explanation. You are not too worried about our knowledge of the external world. You're pretty certain it's there, and the skeptical worry that we can never know the world outside of our minds does not deeply trouble you. You trust in the functioning of the human body and its sensory capabilities to convey accurate information about the environment, and you trust science to explain how all of this is possible. Yeah, but I don't see why it should trouble me. I'm not saying that I trust the functioning of the human body. I'm saying we don't really have a choice, do we? We have to work with the tools that we actually have at our disposal. If you reject your own experience and the corroboratory experience of others, then you've got nothing. You can't even consider any other possibilities because your brain might not even be working. This is the same kind of problem that I have with the people who pretend that solipsism is reasonable. If solipsism is reasonable, then why do you keep acting like it isn't? Why do you behave in the real world like the real world is there? Why don't you believe like it would be consistent to believe if solipsism was actually a thing? Because none of them do. Not one. And the whole thing seems very self-delusory to me. So, yeah, I'm sticking with where I am until somebody can come up with a damn good reason to prove otherwise. And good luck on that. Now we're on to free will, and that's always fun. I already know what my answer here is. I'm a compatibilist, but we'll see. Free will is the ability to control our actions and be morally responsible for them. Determinism is the idea that the universe unfolds according to unchanging laws of nature, which could be the laws of physics or perhaps the will of God, which have determined the course of events in the universe from beginning to end. And I think it's very, very clear that we do have some form of free will, at least to a certain extent, and we can actually debate this for the specifics, but here we're just going to go with what we go with. I don't really understand the way that the hard determinists explain themselves because, as far as I'm concerned, it isn't even coherent. If you have no free will, then you have no capacity to even consider the question of free will in the first place. Therefore, this is a really simple question to answer. I picked the bottom one. And there you go. What'd I tell you? Off to the explanation then. You believe that we have free will, but you think that having free will is compatible with living in a deterministic universe. The freedom to choose is not a metaphysical power that breaks the laws of physics. Rather, freedom consists simply in the ability to do what you choose to do. Your choices might be predetermined, but they are yours nonetheless. If you had a different set of beliefs and desires, then you would have made different choices and done different things. Free will means that you make the choices you do and can be held responsible for those choices because you are you. Now, I don't think that's particularly well stated at all. In fact, it's kind of ridiculous. There are plenty of things that you can't choose to do. I can't decide to just flap my arms and fly. Your choices are restricted to those things that are actually possible within the context of your current situation. But that's kind of a quibble, I suppose, because when you're talking about free will with the determinists and that kind of people, that's not usually the kind of things that come up. In fact, when I'm talking to determinists, and this goes for solipsists too, it works the same way, my first question is usually, why are you having this conversation? Because neither of us have a choice. I don't know. I've never heard a decent response to that. If you have one, let me know in the comments. Anyway, I'm really interested in being accurate, so I had to say it, but, let's just move on. So here's one of probably many places we start running into problems because they're trying to put people into boxes that don't necessarily exist. Question 5. God is usually regarded as an all-powerful deity or multiple deities, worshipped as the creator or ruler of the universe, or as rulers of particular forces of nature or ancestral principles, yada yada yada. However, many individuals question or deny the existence of God, seeing it as incompatible with various aspects of the world as we understand it, or seeing it as something that is impossible to determine. It also says that if you are agnostic, pick the one that fits best. Except this is exactly why I did a long series of posts over on my blog about the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry on atheism and agnosticism. I fundamentally disagree with their entire take on the thing. Of course, as I'm reading this, that hasn't even posted on my blog yet. That'll come up pretty soon. Yet, this is the beginning of April, and I don't expect this video to hit YouTube until sometime at the end of June, but at least you'll have something to go look at if you're interested, and the whole thing will be there. Anyway, I'm going with God not existing because no evidence that we actually have access to even remotely suggests that any of them do. Well, duh, it says I'm an atheist. Of course, I'd still be an atheist even if I'd taken the agnostic route because most agnostics are actually also atheists. It's absurd that the philosophers don't seem to be able to wrap their minds around the concepts of being both these things at the same time. Anyway, on to the explanation. You might believe that there is no supreme being, no all-powerful, all-knowing, maximally good, and benevolent creator of the universe. You might believe that the idea of God's existence is absurd, or you might have what you take to be a conclusive argument for the denial of God's existence. The difference between an atheist and an agnostic is confidence about the claim to knowledge of God's non-existence. So you're only an atheist if you are confident that God doesn't exist. Bullshit! That's absolutely not true. I don't claim to have knowledge, period. That's why I'm an agnostic. There is no evidence that God exists whatsoever. Any gods of any kind, period. And there's also no evidence that gods don't exist. Non-existent things don't leave evidence of their own non-existence. That's how reality works. There is only the fact that I am an evidentialist. I have no clue if that might come up later. I don't know. Could be. I don't know. I haven't read that far. But it means that you don't believe things without evidence to support them, which, as far as I'm concerned, ought to describe every human being on the planet. The fact that it doesn't is abjectly pathetic. So anyway, dumb question. Badly worded, but hey, there you go. Now we're on to knowledge claims. Now I touched on this briefly a second ago, but let's see if we can expand on it. It's one word, but it potentially has multiple meanings. Knowledge. In epistemology alone, it's common to distinguish among three kinds of knowledge. Whether you know how to do something, know a person, or know a fact. Could this knowledge mean the same thing in every situation? Well, as far as I'm concerned, knowledge must be demonstrable and supported. In philosophy, knowledge is often defined as justifiable true belief. And I can go with that, that's fine. If so, though, then how you justify it and how you determine that it is in fact true, That matters, and I see an awful lot of people who can't do that with any of their positions. And that's why religious faith isn't knowledge. It's belief. It's faith based on emotions and not on evidence. It has nothing at all to do with what is demonstrably true in the real world, and I think that demonstration is very, very important. Therefore, even though I disagree with the wording of the question, I'm going with the third option because generally, justified true belief must remain justified and true. And according to them, that makes me an invariantist, which I guess is fine. But again, this was not a well-asked question, and in any reasonable conversation, being forced down a particular road, that shouldn't be permitted to happen. I am talking about a very strict meaning of knowledge, not the way that it gets used in popular parlance. This is a language problem, not a philosophical one. Remember, language is descriptive, it's not prescriptive, and language is always evolving and changing, and people can and do use it loosely. Because if I'm using a single definition of the word throughout, then I'm probably wrong according to the way most other people are using it. Context matters, it always has, and it always will. Anyway, the explanation says, the meaning of knowledge is invariant. That is, it does not vary. This view is opposed to contextualism, which maintains that knowledge refers to different cognitive states depending on the circumstances in which it is used. But yeah, since I'm the one defining how I'm using the word, how does any of that actually matter? This is supposed to be about the nature of knowledge and the nature of knowledge claims. It isn't about how people may use the same word to mean a bunch of different things in different contexts. The whole idea of that is just stupid. If someone says that they know Elvis, I'm going to expect them to be able to produce the same kind of evidence to justify their claims, including evidence that Elvis is still alive, that I would for any scientific claim or religious claim or any other claim for that matter. So, yeah, I'm really not impressed with this question, sorry. So that's where we're going to cut it for the day, lest it gets too ridiculously long. And keep in mind, I've written all of these, and if I just let it roll, it would be well over an hour long. The way I'm looking at it at the moment, this is going to go 3 videos, and I'm not going to do them all together because, yeah, that would drive people crazy and burn their brains. But they will show up over the coming weeks, and I do hope that you enjoy it. I'd really like to see what you have to say, though. Therefore, ta-da! The comments are open. Have at it. Do you agree, disagree, have any further questions or want clarifications? Go ahead and ask, and you know I'll answer. I don't know that anything in this first section was terribly controversial, but who knows? There were a lot that I didn't agree with. There were a lot that were badly worded. There were a lot that were downright stupid, but nothing really controversial, I don't think. What bothers me most about a lot of these quizzes, and I know there really isn't a lot that can be done about it, but it's the fact that it only allows you to go down certain, specific, well-defined paths, and if you don't really fit into any of them, you're kind of boned. There is almost no room for nuance, and that's often absolutely required. Yes, this is just a stupid online quiz, and therefore it's not at all important in the grand scheme of things, but I still find that troubling, at least to me. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments, and as always, I'll be there. If there's one thing that these quizzes are usually good for, it's sparking a lively conversation. So, let's go do that. You go first.